how much of a pandemic, scamdemic, hoax, or reality it is doesn't matter from the aspect of what they are gaining, they, the powers that be, as far as being able to do a lockdown grid all basically over the planet. And they're not going to let that crisis go to waste, especially when they've got round two coming.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance and Reluctant Preppers. We have a popular returning guest, David Morgan, also known as the Silver Guru and founder of themorganreport.com, as well as author of The Silver Manifesto and Second Chance, is here with us again on Reluctant Preppers this Wednesday, June 3rd, 2020. David, thanks for joining us.
Donovan, it's always good to be with you. Thank you.
We've got a lot of questions that have been submitted ahead of your arrival here. And before we get into that, I wanted to see if you could kick us off with an understanding of what's going on in the COMEX. We heard lots of talk over the last half of May that May being a delivery month on the COMEX, we might see a big crisis at the end if people were standing for delivery and couldn't be fulfilled in these delivery notices and things like that. Can you talk to us about what the delivery notices represent and why they're significant?
Yeah, I'll do my best. First of all, this has been going on for a very long time. I mean, the fact that there's a congestion in the delivery month, and there's a lot of people standing for delivery, and it's going to be huge, and it's going to the physical market's going to have a huge effect on it. And if you just I've been around this for a lot of years, and so the facts are this. If you are pulled over for a speeding ticket, you will get a notice to appear. And a notice to appear doesn't mean you're going to go to the judge. A notice to appear means you're probably going to go down the courthouse window or maybe even mail it in and pay the fine. A notice to appear is not an appearance. A notice to deliver is not a delivery. Let me repeat that because it needs to be ingrained into the consciousness of the entire metals world that a notice to deliver is not a delivery. It doesn't even require a delivery, just like a notice to appear doesn't require an appearance. What happens about 99.9% of the time is those things are either book entries between banks or they're settled in cash, even if they go past first notice day, even if they go past the due date delivery-wise. I've done it myself. And you pay a fine for going past the delivery date, but as long as the other party, which 99% of the times is a bullion bank or a bank of some type, will make good on it in paper. So it's a little frustrating to me because there's a lot of the community that don't understand exactly how these markets work and function, and they get all riled up about these notices and they're past the due date, they're past the delivery date, and all this stuff. And if there's any logic to the wording, it might make some sense, but there isn't. It's just like the Patriot Act is about the most unpatriotic thing you can think of. So, if you're past delivery date, that guarantees, no, it doesn't. And all these stops and all that stuff. In fact, I'll go one step further. There's a gentleman that does a great deal of data throughout the metals markets. I've been a subscriber to his website for years. And there is a conjecture that there's a certain amount of silver held by a certain entity. So he went through all the actual deliveries, not notices, and had a number for like a 7-year time frame. And I went through that arithmetic is all it is, and took those and multiplied it by, took the number over that 7-year period and multiplied it by the theoretical 5,000 ounce per contract, which is a rough round number. And it came out almost identical to the amount shown in the public domain. In other words, they lined up almost exactly, which means that all this secret hidden silver and all that, I'm not so sure about it. I'm really not. But I drift off to come back. But, I wish the community would get a little more reconciled to the futures market is just a great big shell game. And one more thing, and I think this is important too, because I heard one of my friends do an interview and he got almost everything 100% right. Now, I'm not saying it's about me being right. I'm just saying the facts. And he made a statement that was very accurate about Buffett back in 99 when he bought all that silver and it came off the COMEX. It did. In fact, 90 million ounces came off the COMEX almost a one fell swoop, more or less. After the Buffett affair, the COMEX made a new rule that you can only deliver 1,500 contracts in a delivery month. But we could say you could do it every month if you force the issue. Purportedly, you might be able to. I'm not sure of that. So that 1,500 contracts is 7.5 million ounces. That's what it is. 1,500 times 5,000. For you that don't know, it's 7.5 million ounces. So if you take that number, 7.5 million, and you multiply it by 10, you get 75 million ounces. That's it. If you go for, and I'm saying 2 months you didn't deliver, just doing it all in my head. So if you take 75 million ounces, then how many years would you need to accumulate, let's say, 800 million ounces? You'd take, 12 years or so. So, I mean, there's a lot of stuff you can just kind of apply some basic arithmetic to. The other thing is if you were actually able to drain off, 120, 130, 140, 150 million ounces of physical off of the COMEX, it would show an actual removal from the COMEX. That's where you get the numbers. You look at what all the bank entities / warehouses hold, and you see month to month, day to day, week to week, however you want to do it, what's going in and what's coming out. And a lot of that stuff just swaps nomenclature. It's not HSBC, it's JPM. It's not JPM, it's Scotia. It's not Scotia, it's CNT. It's not CNT, it's some other one of these approved. I'm not saying there aren't any deliveries off the COMEX. What I am saying is what the Commodities Exchange has said for years. Less than 1% of any commodity, corn, beans, silver, comes off the exchange. Almost all that stuff. And I used to think everything had to go to the COMEX. I mean, I've been educated myself. When I got started, I thought, man, this is easy. The silver goes to the COMEX, it gets approved as a COMEX bar, it has to go in and out of there every single time. Man, this is going to be easy to track. I couldn't have been more naive. Anyway, I beat that horse to death, hopefully. Hopefully it'll get some people interested to argue with me, but they don't understand it. They should get a futures account and trade futures for a living and get a broker that really knows what they're doing and read the contract and get a pair of glasses because the print's about that big. But that's what it says.
Thanks for that perspective. Another thing we'd like you to weigh in on at this time, with all of the upset that's been going on and the unrest across the country. First, it was from the policy responses to the COVID-19 pandemic, where we had, stay-at-home orders and all kinds of disruptions of the supply chains and everything, mine closures, mint closures, things like that. Now we've got demonstrations going on around the country. People are really concerned about stability of our markets, stability of our supply chains, and so on. Pretty Boy Troy 555 says, in your opinion, can we start to see countries like Mexico or Canada begin to nationalize mines as the economic crisis worsens?
Yeah, that was one that I kind of stirred the pot on myself a little bit. I put it out to both our paid members and our free list. A friend of mine, well known in the industry, Marin Katusa, put out a video or a series of videos on a potential nationalization of gold mines, particularly, and it's rather complex, not too complicated. My thesis before that video came out was always this: it's been done. I can't rule it out. I find it highly unlikely for a couple of reasons. Number one, with the NAFTA agreement, as soon as somebody tried to nationalize a mine, you'd have the world governing bodies and the best hotshot lawyers that are available on the planet suing the bejesus out of whoever tried it. That's number one. Number two is when it has been done, it's been totally, completely, and thoroughly proven to be the stupidest move that an entity can make, a country can make, because once this is nationalized, the production level of it gets thrown into the dirt in a relatively short time. In other words, even though they probably have some great, and I'm not trying to put down any particular country, I'm just going by fact. They might have great mining engineers, they might have a great mining staff and everything else, and maybe they learn enough to do it the next time and succeed. But almost all record of fact is that these things deteriorate. They don't have the proper maintenance required and everything else to produce at a rate of flow. In other words, metal out of the ground is so many ounces per month, year and years, that it starts to deteriorate and it backfires on them because they don't get the efficiency out of the mining project that they would have if they just left it alone. And the third reason is it's a heck of a lot easier to leave NAFTA alone, let everybody keep their job that's in the country, and just tax the heck out of it. And that's easier to negotiate through the NAFTA situation than anything else. Now, still, they'd have to go through, around, or get a special, dispensation or redress or whatever. I mean, I don't want to use all the legal terms I know because I don't know that many. But the point is, yeah, I won't rule it out. I think it's way overdone. But I will say the fourth point, which it's outside of the other three. The market is mispricing risk. That part I agree with. I'm not sold on the idea that it's only countries that don't have a swap line with the United States that are at the greatest risk. I look at it differently. I've never had a South African company on the Morgan Report as a suggested recommendation. I have traded in and out of a few of the South Africans, but I felt from the very beginning of this bull market, which began roughly in the year 2000, that the South Africans posed too much risk. So I'd probably beat that one to death as well, but you don't have to be in certain jurisdictions if you don't choose to be. And if you want to spread your risk, you don't want to be in any one country. You don't want to be in, just Canada, for example. Now, is that the safest jurisdiction? Probably one of them, but you never know. I mean, the most unlikely country to nationalize may end up being one that does. I'm not ruling it out. I doubt it's going to happen for all the reasons I outlined, but you want to spread your risk, which means you want to spread it geopolitically throughout the sector. And the easiest way to do that usually is by a well-established royalty company that has multiple jurisdictions in their portfolio. That way, if something goes wrong in one country, for an example, Peru, they've got all kinds of contracts throughout other jurisdictions.
We've got a follow-up and a related question here by Pretty Boy Troy 555, who says, according to some sources, up to a 60% drop in available silver could happen due to mine closures possible this year. With that much of a reduction, what could it mean for prices? So maybe you want to take that in two steps. If you can first tell us what you believe you're seeing in terms of actual mine production delta this year because of all the disruptions, and then what that might have to do with prices going forward.
It sounds like this guy does his homework, and congratulations. I actually referenced that in a video I did, I think, last week, and also I did it in a report, which I just published 2 days ago. Yeah, I forget the name of the website. It's noted in the Morgan Report. But according to this rather, I would say, sophisticated mining website, it's actually 66% declination in the available silver supply due to the mining closures worldwide. And they went through how they came with that number, all accepted at face value. No one can prove it. The next biggest hit was uranium. It was like 33% of the market. So silver has definitely hit the hardest. What will it mean? Well, that's pretty obvious, but we got to think of both sides. It means supply is down substantially, but we also know that demand is down substantially on the industrial side, but not necessarily on the investment side. In fact, on the investment side, it seems to be rather robust. So what does it mean? My best stab at it right now is it means higher silver prices, because all markets move at the margin. And I went through this in the Morgan Report. I won't do all the math in my head, but basically if you took that factor of 66% and you extended it out for, let's say, 6 months, not saying 6%, 66% for the whole 6 months, but does it come back from minus 66 to 0 to where there's no degradation in supply the next week when the restrictions go away? No, it's a ramp up. And a lot of companies that have had their mines closed will look at the efficiencies of those mines and say, that thing's marginal. We're barely making it, that mine. We're not going to reopen that one. And so you see a lot of changes within the industry just for efficiency reasons. And then there's other reasons on top of that. So I look at it as net bullish. I think there's more of a supply disruption problem, especially when a lot of the manufacturers go direct, not only from the smelter direct to their, inventory supply. They also a lot of them go direct from the recyclers to their, shelves in their warehouses to have a silver supply. And that's been disrupted because there's this, transportation issue, the supply chain breakdown. So that's 170 million ounces a year, which is kind of the float that you need just to keep, all the iPhones and iPads and flat screens and memory switches and batteries and solar panels and everything else going. So I'm looking at it as net bullish, but not screamingly bullish. The thing that's screamingly bullish is investment demand, and that can change rapidly and astonishingly large in relative percentage terms. So that's what I'd be looking for.
Yeah, and I guess that leads into the next question about these sort of macro factors that can cause trends in the environment that we're in. We talked about the unsettled environment earlier. Gregory Snyder has a question related to that. I know you've talked with us in the past about like the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse at the end of empires, that sort of thing. His question is, are there or have there been in the past in other countries that experienced hyperinflations or pronounced deflations, cultural attitude changes that can be quantified that indicate what is coming before it actually comes? I'm asking because everyone says we don't know where the breaking point is, or what we are in uncharted territory. We don't know when the music will stop. Are there social attitude metrics that can give us indicators as to how or when confidence triggers an implosion?
Well, that's a great question. I'm fairly studied on it. I mean, it depends on the culture. It depends, what you can quantify. I mean, basically right now, the resets is happening, folks. I think most people listening to Reluctant Preppers or Finance and Liberty know that to the bottom of their being. But there's a lot of people out there who are still deer in the headlights that, it's different, but it's going to be okay. And, it's changed drastically. So I don't know how to answer that. I really wish I had a good answer for him, but I don't. I would just say that it's already taken place. So, that shift or that turning point or that inflection point, I don't know what the precursor is, but what I do know is when my number one rule of silver investing is implemented. I mean, I forget the exact wording and I wrote it, but I wrote it 20 years ago. But rule number one is no one wants to be a prophet of doom. But in the unlikely event of a total economic collapse, silver will become the money of last resort, not gold, because silver could be used in day-to-day transactions on a barter or a monetary basis, whereas gold will hold too much value to be meaningful in any significant way for the average person on the street. It's a bit of an ad lib. It's true, I wrote it. It's not word for word how I wrote it back 20 years ago or 18 or whatever it was, but it's pretty close.
Well, it's a new and improved version with your added experience of the years. Yeah, and you've talked to us in the past about that 4 horsemen of the apocalypse and the end of empires and all the stages that show correlations between our current era and that of like the end of the Roman Empire and so on. So.
Yeah. Well, I will interject. Sorry, but I mean, thanks. It kind of coached me a little bit. I mean, basically, the precursor is the one that's the hardest of the hard, and that's picking the top. In the Roaring '20s, it just doesn't get better than this. And basically, in our own empire, stock market's all-time highs, and businesses are great, and But if you're really truthful, you're starting to see the rot underneath the facade. Of course, I've been pointing at that for years. But if you go by the statistical analysis performed by the nice government men, you would think that everything was just fantastic. But the truth of the matter is we've had a global contraction in the economy on a global basis way before CV ever showed up. So that was my warning. What did I see? I saw too much misdirection of the facts, but this is typical. So is that what this guy wants for an answer? Is it satisfactory for an answer for him? I doubt it, but it is the way I saw it. It's like, look, I'm seeing through this bogus good times are here forever nonsense. 2008 was a precursor to the ultimate, depression that we're going to suffer as a global empire. And there's nothing they can do about it this time. Oh, yeah, they'll print the heck out of the money supply, but that's not going to help hardly anybody. All it'll do is anyone that's willing to accept it before it's worthless, the banks will own all the, mortgages, they'll own all the factories, they'll own all the businesses, they'll own all the loans, all the debt, they'll own everything. They'll own everything that there is because whomever was out there that needed the cash, they just printed it up in the back room with a few digits on the computer. How many trillions do you want? Yep, there you go. And take over the asset. Now, a lot of these assets are just totally, completely 100% make-believe. They're just a bet on top of a bet. That's why we've got 1 quadrillion in derivatives, because people are making a bet on which way an interest rate's going to go. And someone made a bet on how, not only what direction it's going to go, but how soon it's going to get there. And then somebody else made a bet on not only how soon it's going to get there, but what day of the week it falls on. And then somebody makes a bet on that, and not only what day of the week it falls on, but what is it's before noon or afternoon. I mean, this thing is beyond cartoonish characterization. I mean, what I'm making up doesn't even show any real aggressiveness toward how fallacious, the fallacy, the illogic notions that are done in some of these math formulas that are actually purported to have value. I mean, it's, when Buffett said, in I think 2002, these things are, they're whatever the noun was of financial mass destruction. I mean, he was right. I mean, these things are weapons of financial mass destruction. There's no doubt about it.
So when things get reconciled and into reality, we're going to be having John Williams from shadowstats.com on very soon, and I think he's going to shed some cold, hard light of truth behind a lot of these irrational claims or propagandistic claims of the best economy ever and that sort of thing. When the real story does come out, this leads into the next question. Will the gold-silver ratio widen again when possibly the second quarter results send stocks or metals tumbling?
Possibly. I mean, I will never, be such an apologist for silver that I'm stuck to a paradigm and it's got to be mine. I mean, I've always said the market knows more than anyone. I mean, the late, great Richard Russell was very much in line with that thinking, and I agree. But I doubt it. And the reason I doubt it is that the silver market is so small relative to the gold market. And people that are actually in the know that if you really, the old adage that he who owns the gold makes the rules is true. The banks own most of the gold, at least half of it. And they are making the rules. But he who owns the silver can make the gold rules. And I'm not saying that because I'm such a silver aficionado. I'm saying it because gold is great for money and jewelry, and that's it. Silver is absolutely essential. Without silver, the whole communication system breaks down. The whole modern society breaks down without silver. You don't have not only solar panels, which are kind of late to the party, but you have no communications, no electricity, no computers, no silver batteries for your hearing aids, these type of things. I mean, the silver battery industry alone could wipe out the entire silver supply, but no one really wants to go there because no one really wants to. It's not spending the money. Silver's so dirt cheap, it wouldn't be much a cost. It'd be the fact that there isn't enough to replace lithium ions with something that really lasts for a long time and something that over time would probably pay you back the cost of the product times 2 or 3, but so there's a lot in the silver world that could have taken place that hasn't, that would actually wipe out pretty much the silver supply just on the industrial side. but it doesn't take place because there's too much, let's say, pressure in the paradigm that we exist in, that, oil's the best fuel source. And, for my knowledge, it probably is. I mean, not counting nuclear, I'm probably way off on a tangent. I don't mean to be. The point is that there have been applications in silver on the industrial side that would basically corner the whole market, but you don't see it happen because there's way too much pressure from one of the least known cartels in the world called the Silver Users Association, which takes in a bunch of users of silver to maintain a proxy group to make sure that silver maintains a price level where they can maximize their profits and also sort of dictate what the allocation is for the metal in an industrial side.
Earlier, we were talking about the potential of confiscation as an event, and people are remembering back to 1933, the stories we've heard about Franklin Roosevelt calling in anybody who had private holdings of silver bullion, that kind of thing, in exchange for cash at $20 an ounce, and then overnight revaluing it. This question, can gold be revalued in an instant move instead of the 2 to 3 year bull market that some have been forecasting? And if so, what would that mean for the price of silver?
Don't know. First answer is yes. Second answer is don't know. First answer is yes. I mean, it's possible that a Russia or a China, even a U.S., but I would more likely think for, practical reasons that could take place. I think it's very unlikely the U.S. It would be, let's say, we'll just pick on Russia today. Russia says we are going to back our currency. The ruble will be backed by gold at this ratio. And once that ratio was established, then you would go into the currency markets and see what the exchange rate was for U.S. dollars into rubles at that time, and that would be basically a fix right there. So you'd have a gold fix based on the currency markets at the time Russia declared that the ruble was worth, X amount of gold, or X amount of gold equals X amount of rubles. So that's possible. Is it likely? No. If gold is reintroduced into the monetary system, I doubt it would be a rogue state. I think these bankers have always been internationalists. They've always been New World Orderists. They've always been globalists. They just think in the terms of, I don't care who makes the rules. I don't care if you're communist, fascist, democratic, libertarian, or tribal. As long as we create the money, we don't care what kind of laws you have. Doesn't matter. We control you anyway. I mean, this is one concept that I can't seem to get through to most people, but it's one of the most important to think about anyway. So the other part is, what would it do to silver? Well, that's an intellectual exercise, and I definitely have thought about it. What it could mean, and I think would mean, is that silver becomes the new gold. The only thing that would be private, even, if you're in Coinbase, how private is your crypto really? Yeah, you can play games with it and get a stealth wallet and all this stuff. All right, fine. But I mean, once you're in Coinbase, you're pretty well identified. Anyway, back on point, if you have silver coins or gold coins, you're pretty anonymous. But there will be all of a sudden about the only private money that you could have, and I'll say outside of crypto with quotation marks, would be silver. So there'd probably be a big wake-up aha moment for those that are insightful and thought through history and see what that really means. Most people would have no effect whatsoever. They'd say that doesn't mean anything. But those that are thoughtful enough to see through that and get past the propaganda would realize that the only private monetary asset that they could use would be silver. And so for all the reasons that gold is so coveted today, you probably see that same philosophy move into the silver market. Would it be quickly or slowly would remain to be determined. And again, I'm throwing it out as a thought experiment. You asked me what I thought, that's what I think. It's more important for the questioner to think it through on his own or her own and determine for themselves. But yeah, I have given that some thought.
Back to the topic of unsettling times and unrest and protests and that sort of thing. There's been people concerned about as these and also in the lockdowns that we saw in the various basically policy moves that really curtailed our civil liberties during the COVID-19, and people talk about will there be a second wave, et cetera. One of the concerns people have in that environment is moving precious metals around physically on your, in your possession, on your person, and the whole specter of civil asset forfeiture being a phenomenon in recent years, we're being told from multiple sources in multiple states. BKBK asks, how do you hide your silver and gold from crooked cops on the highway? That we can broaden that out to just generally, how do you transport or carry precious metals in any safe manner?
Yeah, well, that's a great question, and I'm going to give you an answer. You, again, will have to digest it for yourself. I actually learned this from an old guy. Of course, I'm an old guy now. But back when we started the Silver Summit, again, roughly 2 decades ago, this guy's probably about the age I am now. So, I was like 45 or whatever. And he had come from one state, I don't know, 10 states away. And he's pretty interested in the whole honest money, gold, silver, mining, all the stuff that we do there at the Silver Summit. And he talked to me, and I don't have one on my desk to show you, but he had a baggie, sandwich bag. And in the sandwich bag, he had a lot of slugs. I think you know what I'm saying. United States minted pieces of metal that are basically pot metal, worthless, stuff, or near worthless. I mean, all metal has some value. And within that baggie of slugs, he had 2 Krugerrands, and he had about 4 $half silver $half, and some constitutional silver, and I think he even had a round or 2. So he had a baggie about that size, sandwich bag baggie, and in it he had a bunch of U.S. coinage and some gold and some silver mixed with it. And he says, I just throw that on the security belt, and when they x-ray it, it's all a bunch of round discs. The x-ray machine doesn't distinguish it whatsoever, and he goes, I never have a problem. But I always like to carry a couple ounces of gold around with me. So does that solve the problem that was asked? The answer is it may help. I mean, if you've got, $150,000 worth of gold, do you put 10 baggies in your car? I don't know. But I think that was help. I always thought that was a great idea. In fact, I started to implement it on some of my trips, and I always wear gold because I have never needed it in a hostile situation. But there's a friend of ours that basically by having about an ounce or so of gold around his neck, after he was taken out in the middle of nowhere and all his currency was taken from him and his plastic, got a hitchhike back into an airport and held up this gold chain and said, this thing is worth, whatever it was at the time, $1,800, and I need an $800 plane ticket. Who wants to take it? And somebody did. So anyway, I digress again, but that's an interesting story. I won't give away his name because I don't have his permission, but believe it or not, and if you don't want to believe it, look at it at least as a metaphor, because we all know there's stories that abound, especially during these type of economic conditions where the border guards are, paid off in gold coins, or, a certain secret was sold for gold or whatever. I mean, there's a lot of stories like that. Some of them are obviously true.
Another question into a world that we're heading into about if this is from Deerfly Guy. If the USA goes into a Great Depression, or should the dollar we know collapse and precious metals somehow become involved in a new monetary system, he goes on, how do you visualize a precious metal stacker being able to, quote, spend or convert his precious metals? What venues do you think might crop up as a practical source, such as a necessary established way for PMs to be utilized by those of us who have been long prepper savers in just such an occasion?
Well, there's a way to do it right now, and that I think will continue through this reset process that we're in already. So one would be, for example, my friend Dale here it's not my hometown, but I've lived here 20 years, will process Bitcoin, metal, or currency for any variety of that you want. So let me rephrase that a little more succinctly. So you could transact gold in, Bitcoin out, gold in, dollars out, gold in, silver out. You can do any mechanism you can think of through his facility. And that's just one. So there's several actually out there in the crypto world where you could ship your silver or gold or both into that account and come out with a crypto. And in some cases, not all, you'd be able to take that particular crypto and exchange it for any one that you wish to own. So in other words, you have XYZ crypto and maybe you don't like that one, but you've exchanged your gold for that. You can immediately, once the account clears, take that into Bitcoin, for an example. So there's that. The other one would be, if it is officially monetized, then there'll be facilities already that would be set up. It could be the banks, most likely. It could be the banks and the post office, for example. And there will be market makers immediately. There's always somebody that's willing to be a middleman that'll say, hey, you don't know how to do it very efficiently. I do. All I'm going to do is have this sign out in front of my store. Come in with your metal. I will do all the work for you. All I want is 0.5% to make that transaction for you, and you can walk out with cash at the same time. Or the new Fed, ID / debit card, or whatever it is, the federal credit. I always remember that from one of the more recent Star Wars movies. I know it was probably in the last 2 or 3, but I think 4 back, that little guy flying around with the federal credits.
This is a thought-provoking one. Peter Mangano says, what belief has all of the recent insanity led you to reconsider the most?
That people are basically sane. I really thought that the majority of people had enough ability to use Occam's razor and find the most logical, easiest solution is almost always the correct one. And I have witnessed on a global basis that isn't true. So it's put that belief down.
How does that affect how you carry yourself going forward, or how does that maybe shift the way that you plan on taking actions in the future or anything? How does that affect you?
It's made me more fearful. I mean, I hate to play the fear card. You've known me for years, but if the inability of the sanity of the populace at large is clinically insane, then I will look like the outsider. I won't be able to take the logical approach with an unemotional stance in an objective way and get through to anyone. Say anyone, but very few. So it's rather disheartening if you actually digest what I just said. Am I right or wrong? He asked me my opinion on it. He may have a different one, but I'm a pretty savvy guy. I've been around a long time, and I've been outside the box in almost all circumstances to look at it differently. And that's the way I see it.
This one's related. It's from Bill Wood, who asked, David, what's the second thing that keeps you awake at night? You've talked to us in the past about some other things, but what is there anything new that, and maybe it's related to what you were just sharing?
Yeah, I don't think it's new. Just the moral decline. I mean, I remember being asked on shows like yours, and you might have asked me, do I see civil unrest? And I always said yes, I did. I saw civil unrest in the major cities, anywhere where there's a high entitlement set of programs, where those were in jeopardy, or just in those areas alone that I saw, civil unrest. What has me more concerned, I guess, is kind of adding on to what I just said, that we meaning a collective of people that still hold a moral high ground to do something. And that's difficult. If you can't use logic and objective reasoning, it's all emotion. It's hard to walk in the middle of a crowd with, a Spock type of attitude when you get, 4 or 5 bricks bashed up against your head to talk any sense. And so it's, again, I use the word, I don't like to use it, but I think the fear-based structure of society has been so well manufactured by the elites that we might be in a system / situation that they do have a lot more control of it. I don't think it's over yet. I still hold a lot of people in very heartfelt high regard. I know generally speaking, that the rural communities usually are a little slower paced and a little less inclined to act emotionally. But we've got a lot of difficulties ahead of us. And I really would like to ask the audience if they know, and they do, but maybe they do, is, how can I be of maximum service at this point in time? I mean, if you've got your silver, is getting a lot more going to really help you? Well, maybe. But I mean, it's more about the moral decline of the entire populace that's much more concerning. I mean, if you ever saw the movie or read the book, The Road, I mean, in that movie or in the book, when the guy's taking his son across the country because he has to or they're going to die, I come across that one farmhouse and he finds a coffee can with a bunch of gold coins in it and just puts it back up on the shelf. It's not doing them any good. They needed food. And this is what we're facing, folks. I don't want to sit here and say what I'm saying. I really don't. But I have to because, a lot of people have looked at me for as much truth as I can provide. I'm human. I make mistakes. I try very much not to over exaggerate, over embellish, or any of that stuff. I mean, even my webmasters over the years said, geez, all these other letter writers are really pushing the fear card and you just don't. Why don't you add a little to your, sales letter? And I just refuse to do it, but I'm not selling anything. I'm not selling survival food or any of that stuff. I'm just trying to sell ideas that are profoundly life-changing and most valuable in such stressful times. I mean, the idea to keep your head calm while everyone else is losing theirs. But that as a metaphor sounds good, unless you're somewhere where this stuff is burning up across the street. I mean, and I don't want to over-exaggerate. I don't know the numbers. I quit watching. I don't watch the mainstream news hardly ever, but I do get a lot of alternative news. And so how many, shops have been burned, how many cops have been killed and all, I don't know. One's too many, in theory. I mean, but anyway, I'll hand it back to you. I could go on and on. I'm kind of mumbling here, but it's very, very much upsetting to me as far as how fast it's happened and how difficult it is to come back to a semblance of where we were just a month ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a significant medical procedure planned for next week, and they called me up today to do a pre-admission health screening questionnaire. I thought, okay, fine, whatever. What do you want to know? First thing you want to know is, have you been following the COVID-19 stay-at-home guidelines? And I said, well, in general, yes. And he said, well, have you traveled out of state recently? And we had just done a trip over the last weekend to look some house looking in another state, trying to find a better preparedness location to live. And I said, yeah, we just traveled to do house looking. Okay, well then you can't have your medical procedure next week. You gotta self quarantine for 2 weeks. But it's like, you gotta be kidding me. Yeah. I thought that was over. I thought we were past that hump. Nope, guess not. So.
Yeah, well, they're using it. The powers that be are using it as a control mechanism. There's no doubt about it. And unfortunately, I see it as this wave 2 is baked into the cake. I don't know enough to know all the details, but in a way, the details are irrelevant because how much of a plandemic, scamdemic, hoax, or reality it is doesn't matter from the aspect of what they are gaining, the powers that be, as far as being able to do a lockdown grid all basically over the planet. And they're not going to let that crisis go to waste, especially when they've got round 2 coming, whatever that means. It could just mean no real change, but higher level of propaganda to make everyone believe it's worse. I don't know. That, I think, is unlikely. I unfortunately think that it will be a step up in severity to the amount of people getting sick. And I really am sick to say that, but that's that's how I currently think about it.
You mentioned a few minutes ago asking people to shift their mindset to what can I give back, or what can I do for others? How can I be of use to my fellow man? You wrote the Silver Manifesto like 20 years ago, and I understand you just did a it was out of print, and you did a reprint of it, and you'd like to give a copy of that away. So I guess I'll ask you to pick a number between 1 and 25, and we're going to see of the people who submitted questions for this interview, who's going to be in line for that free copy of the Silver Manifesto.
Sure, I'll go with 17.
Stu Utes. We're going to send a message to Stu Utes asking for a mailing address so we can send out a copy of that book and try to get that to happen. So awesome. Thank you, David. I've seen you speak multiple times at conferences on the main stage. I've had the opportunity of interviewing you dozens of times over the last, since 2013 when we started this. And you continue to be one of those people who tirelessly gives back and gives your experience, your judgment, your knowledge, your perspective to others. And we're grateful for you sharing that with us here on Finance and Liberty and Reluctant Preppers.
Well, my pleasure. I, trust that the answers are sufficient. I wish I could do more or say something or provide an antidote for the insanity. I really don't have one. If I come up with one, next time I'm on your show, I'll provide it. But it's time to be as real with yourself as you can be. If you are in tune on any spiritual aspect, I would call it the full armor of God. I mean, I really think at this point in time, to put your faith in man is ludicrous. You've got to put it somewhere higher, and that is my belief system. It doesn't have to be yours, but it provides a level of comfort where I don't need or wish to dwell on the aspects that we discussed today that could keep others, I guess, fretting all night or whatever. I mean, you've got to accept the reality where we are, and you've got to be able to do the changes that you can do. So hopefully my goal is to be more empathetic, more compassionate, more open-hearted, and calmer in a situation that is getting more and more unpredictable at all times.
Yeah, there was a blogger that I follow pretty closely, Daisy Luther, the organic prepper. She put out an article about a week ago that said in any crisis situation, there's 3 things you need to do: accept, plan, and act. Even if that takes 1 second, no matter what it is, if it's a car sliding off a cliff or if it's somebody's active shooter situation or whatever, or somebody breaking in your front door or whatever, you got to accept that wasn't what you got to accept the situation as it is at that moment, and then quickly plan what it is you're going to do and then take action. So you were talking about the acceptance part, realizing that as crazy as this world is, it's not the ultimate reality. There's a reality that's greater than what's going on here. And we need to take this as it is and then decide to plan what we're going to do and then take action accordingly. So thank you for being with us and for leading with an open heart as you do. And we've been speaking with David Morgan, founder of themorganreport.com, which is where you can find him. And David, thank you for joining us here again.
My pleasure. I'm looking forward to coming back. It was it wasn't a grilling, but it was a very thought-provoking set of questions this time. They always are, but this one particularly I think it's only because of the situation we all find ourselves in. So thanks again. Looking forward to coming back. Thank you, everyone. Please get on the free list. Go to themorganreport.com, and I do the weekly perspective every week, and that will keep you informed, basically on the financial side of what's going on in the real world.
If you've decided that now is the right time for you to protect your family's financial future by acquiring physical precious metals, gold and silver, I'm delighted to let you know that I have now become a licensed dealer's representative for Miles Franklin, one of the oldest and most trusted names in bullion dealerships. And we can provide you with physical delivery to your personal possession or to professional vault storage or precious metals IRAs. Just email me at libertyandfinance@protonmail.com, and please include your name and phone number in your email to libertyandfinance@protonmail.com. We'll get right back with you and find out how to best meet your needs so that you can either begin or increase your acquisition of physical precious metals now and protect your family's future starting today.